On August 27, 1954, my 18th birthday, I departed from Charleston for duty in the United States Army. In 1954, I began a 3-year stint in the United States Army. My first duty was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, where I was to receive basic military training. I entered U.S. Army Reception Center Barracks, where my life was about to change. We were assigned bunks in the barracks and began our meal times in the 1,000-man mess hall at Fort Dix. The first 3 days were constant IQ and other tests. Then we were issued Army uniforms, boots, equipment, and other things needed for basic training. After issue of all gear, the drills began. We learned the basics of military formations. We learned to march in formation everywhere we went. We learned rifle positions used during inspections and positions of rifles at attention situations. Every soldier was expected to perform at least 10 chin-ups, and we were taught how to field strip and properly clean rifles. The last week of basic training was long marches. After 6 weeks of basic, every soldier was sent elsewhere for specialty training. I was assigned to advanced infantry training and was to be transferred to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Prior to reporting to Fort Knox, I was given a week's leave. I went home to get some home cooking and much needed rest. I also had a chance to see old high school friends. I reported to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which would be the location for my advanced infantry training. Here, I would go through intense combat schooling that would develop skills for all aspects of military life in an infantry battery. Unfortunately for me, this training would be conducted during the winter months. As everyone knows, the chain of command is sacred in the military. My friend Ed Whittington enlisted with me. He was not assigned to the same squad, but I was in the same training sessions, so I saw him often. One good thing about the military, you are never lonely because you're in barracks with many soldiers. I cannot tell you how many times during basic training that we scrubbed the floors in the barracks. The Army chow in the mess halls is not the greatest, but when you're really hungry, who cares? In the mess halls, no coffee cup is ever allowed to be out of line. Another good thing about the military is the post exchange. I always thought Costco must have got their business plan from the military. Here is an interior view of the post exchange. There wasn't much you couldn't buy here. Cigarettes were 50 cents a carton. Every morning, we awoke to the sound of reveille. We would fall out and stand in formation for the roll call. In basic training, physical training was more intense than during our initial basic training at Fort Dix. For some reason unknown to me, the number of chin-ups you could do was important. I became an expert at push-ups. Every time I screwed up, the sergeant would yell, "Give me 25 push-ups, Campbell." Sit-ups were even more grueling, and whoever thought up squat jumps was sadistic. The physical exercise was a daily part of Army life in basic training. To make it tough, you were expected to meet goals that were increased on a daily basis. We trained every day to aim and fire the M1 rifle. Many days during training, we were faced with cold and snow. The M1 rifle was the most important weapon for an infantry soldier, so we spent many hours training with the weapon. Here is another day on the rifle range. That is my friend Ed Whittington and me on the left. Many hours were spent with technique. Live ammo was not used during these sessions. Another day on the firing range. We learned to fire in many positions: standing, squatting, sitting, and prone position. Here I'm firing on the range with targets at 100 yards. On windy days, we practiced adjusting our sights to compensate for the wind. Ammunition detail required accurate accounting for all ammo, a skill needed during combat. Bayonet drills included ways to defend yourself against attackers. Sometimes these drills became very realistic. Rifle and bayonet together weigh over 10 pounds, and after hours of drills, it seemed more like 100 pounds. Good physical conditioning is important for successful bayonet combat. Or, as they say, bayonet drills are not for sissies. Next, we were taught the techniques for close combat. Close combat training focused on understanding the importance of being aggressive. After several days of close combat training, it was amazing how confidence improved your techniques. Before each exercise, we would watch instructors demonstrate the various techniques. Infiltration courses showed us the methods for crossing enemy territory under fire. The infiltration course included many types of obstacles. The importance of protecting the rifle was stressed. Dirty rifles do misfire. Crawling on your belly for long distances under the watchful eye of instructors who made sure you did it correctly. Water and mud was a part of the obstacle course. Getting your weapon wet and muddy, as this soldier was doing, was a certain recipe for repeating the course again. Barbed wire obstacles caught on clothing and cut many a finger. Every soldier was taught how to fire the .50 caliber machine gun. This instruction included how to disassemble, clean, and reassemble the machine gun. Practicing the machine gun setup procedure was very important to minimize the setup time. Targets for machine gun practice were hauled to the range and set up each day. At first, the target distance was not far away. Machine gunning is a two-man team effort. Ammo control is key. Team members switch duties often during training. Another important skill for infantry soldiers is the techniques for handling grenades. It is not like throwing a baseball. Throwing from several positions requires practice. We threw from behind sandbags in case of a short or misthrown grenade. It took some time to develop accuracy. The 60mm mortar training was complex because the sighting and range control is very difficult. We also learned to fire the more powerful 80mm mortar. The rocket launcher, which we called recoilless rifle, training was a two-man team effort. It was difficult to fire because of the trajectory of the shells. Sighting was also a skill that was difficult to master. As with other weapons, we learned to fire from different positions. Here is the squatting position, the kneeling position. Here, another day on the practice range. Learning how to handle the ammo is another key factor. Every day, we spent time learning how to defend ourselves in combat situations. We were also given instructions on handling of prisoners. Digging foxholes was not fun, but a very useful thing to learn. How to take down the enemy in hand-to-hand combat was another useful learning experience. The handling, cleaning, and firing of the .45 caliber pistol is one of the easier weapon training exercises. It goes without saying that chemical weapons training was the least favorite classes of most soldiers. Before exposure to the gas chamber, we were taught how to quickly don a gas mask. We were exposed to tear gas and found out immediately if the mask was on correctly. Those that did not pay attention learned the hard way. In this photo, guess who did it wrong? The infantry soldier must be capable of living in the field while maintaining the flexibility to move often and quickly. We trained for this by spending a great deal of time living under field conditions in all kinds of weather. Utensils in the field must be cleaned in hot water to prevent dysentery. We spent nighttime on bivouac in the snow. We learned to prepare all the gear for training exercises. Snow and cold weather is normal at Fort Knox in February, and we saw lots of it. Here is a morning head count and inspection. We had to refuel the water heaters often. The food and field kitchen traveled with the troops in the field. Each company pitched tents in designated areas. Combat courses were set up and soldiers were tested on various skills. We learned to use a compass, and one was issued to every soldier. We were well schooled in its use. A long and difficult compass course was assigned each squad, and the time to navigate the course was limited. There was never a lack of activity during bivouac training exercises. M1 rifles were cleaned often during field exercises. Combat courses, including stations where hand-to-hand combat knowledge would be tested, were used during these exercises. Test scores were kept on all exercises. Low scores would mean repeating the exercise. Each man was expected to complete the 100-yard dash in a reasonable time. At the completion of bivouac, all scores were totaled. High-scoring teams were exempted from details such as kitchen police as a reward. After 4 grueling weeks on bivouac, we marched several miles back to our barracks. A week later, we completed the advanced infantry training and received assignments for our next duty station. I received orders to report to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I would join the 101st Airborne Division and attend parachute jump school. Prior to reporting to Fort Campbell, I spent a week at home with my family. My next training would be paratrooper school at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. In airborne school, we double-timed to all classes. Physical training was very intense and constant. We learned to tote with us all of the tools of a paratrooper's trade. Communications instruction protocol was taught in special classes. After practicing landing techniques for several days, we jumped from 150 feet towers many times. The hardest part was running up the tower stairs. Jumping from the 30-foot tower was more difficult, as you had to glide down a cable and drag along the ground to a stop. We learned the technique for packing parachutes. During jump school, we were required to jump with the parachute that we packed. Prior to the first jump, we were familiarized with the C-47 aircraft. Finally, after 4 weeks of pre-jump training, we made our first jump. After the first jump, we jumped every day for a week before earning our badge. We were also required to make a night jump. The night jump was more challenging, especially the landing. After a successful landing, it was necessary to gather chutes for reuse the following day. Each paratrooper was required to pack his own chute. Collapsing the chute on windy days required skill. After 6 grueling weeks, we received the certificate of completion. In April 1955, I completed airborne school and received orders for my next assignment. I learned that I would be joining the 8th Infantry Regiment in Germany. Before shipping overseas, I spent 30 days on furlough at home. My next duty would be overseas with the 4th Infantry Division, 8th Infantry Regiment in Butzbach, Germany. Several hundred soldiers boarded a troop carrier in New York Harbor for the 10-day voyage to Germany. Our voyage ended at Bremerhaven, Germany, port of embarkation, where a military band welcomed us. At Bremerhaven, we boarded trains to our destinations. Those traveling long distances boarded sleeping cars. My destination was Butzbach, Germany, a small village about 40 miles from Frankfurt, Germany. Schloss Concern was the home of the famous 8th Infantry Regiment. Schloss Concern was a centuries-old castle that had been converted to a German military base before World War II. The U.S. captured the base near the war's end. Ceremonial uniforms of the famous 8th Infantry Regiment were prevalent at every major parade held in and around Butzbach. Here is the regimental crest of the 8th Infantry Regiment. Most of the villages around Butzbach housed other regiments of the 4th Infantry Division. I was assigned to the 1st Battalion. I was in Company B, and here is a picture of Company B of the 8th Infantry Regiment. Reveille at Schloss Concern was a early morning ritual, and here you see the 8th Infantry Regiment passing in review on parade grounds. The defense of our country is an obligation of every American. We of the 8th Infantry Regiment are making our contribution to the national security by maintaining our high standard of combat readiness and serving proudly as part of the NATO defense. We did 60 millimeter mortar practice often, and occasionally we practiced with the 80 millimeter mortar. We maintained proficiency with the BAR and other weapons. Winters in Germany are very harsh, and cold weather training was a constant part of our training for combat readiness during wintertime. Snow and icy conditions were commonplace, but most soldiers adapted as necessary. Most of our combat drills were extremely realistic. Battery-operated communication radio was the norm for the times. Maps and compass were still the way to navigate. Combat exercises included river crossings, as Germany has many rivers and streams. Inflatable rafts were used to transport squads of soldiers across rivers. Night crossings were preferred to take advantage of the cover of darkness. Rocket launcher drills were another realistic combat readiness exercise. Every squad was expected to remain proficient. We used live ammo in most of the exercises. The locations chosen would be closed to all non-military personnel. We practiced smokescreen tactics, house-to-house combat readiness. We practiced digging in at various positions, and oftentimes we coordinated our exercises with the tank division to keep our training realistic. Combat readiness was not a buzzword. We worked hard every day to maintain our readiness. Here I check my field gear. Every soldier is expected to be ready for immediate deployment. After long days, even the field kitchen food seems okay. Here I clean my canteen liquids container. It is no wonder that I learned to love coffee. Believe me, it was something every soldier looked forward to in cold weather. We also did sniper practice. Only the best riflemen became snipers, but everyone was taught the fundamental skills. When we were not in the field, we stood for inspections constantly, and our wall lockers were kept in extremely neat condition. We also had a lot of regimental parades, and many dignitaries visited Butzbach to view the troops. Many military commanders also visited to see how our regiment conducted exercise. Of course, this meant a parade and review. One of the ways to be excused from duties, play sports. I was a member of the battery basketball team. Here I'm number 20. We played against all the other battalions in the division, and competition was intense because of unit pride. Our company also played competitive baseball. The town of Butzbach, Germany, is just outside the Schloss Concern Gate. After serving a year in Butzbach, the military decided to rotate the 4th Division back to the United States. I would not return to the States because I was chosen to be transferred to Berlin, Germany, where I would join the 6th Infantry Regiment. I was transferred to the 6th Infantry Regiment in Berlin, Germany in early 1956. Here, it was the home of the famous 6th Infantry Regiment. Berlin was divided into 4 zones after World War II: the French, British, Russian, and American. The U.S. Army kept the Autobahn from Western Germany into the surrounded city of Berlin protected and open by using constant armed convoys. The entrance gatehouse to McNair Barracks, my new home. Here, an aerial view of McNair Barracks. I served here during 1956 and 1957 before the wall was built between East and West Berlin. We had many reviews at McNair Barracks, and the passing of the colors was nearly a monthly event. Parades were a normal part of Berlin duty. Here you see lowering of the garrison flag. Regimental headquarters was very near McNair Barracks. The 6th Infantry Regiment is an elite unit. The United States sector of Berlin included 6 districts: Zollendorf, Stiglitz, Schönberg, Tempelhof, Kreuzberg, and Neukölln. Military compounds were located in each of these districts, and the U.S. Air Force maintained an airfield in the Tempelhof district. Military duty in Berlin was spit and polish type soldiering because we needed to show the local citizens that we were a disciplined and well-trained army. Every soldier was required to wear tailored uniforms, keep boots highly shined, and keep all belongings, including our M1 rifles, in tip-top condition. Frequent inspections were called to check out our adherence to these standards. Here you see us marching on a Berlin street. Here the Kurfürstendamm showing the bombed Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church. Major demolition and rebuilding from World War II was still underway in 1956. One of our duties was guard duty at Spandau Prison, which held many of the Nazi war criminals. Each occupying country rotated guard duty monthly. Guard duty was very closely watched. Spit and polish was the order of the day. Border patrol was another of the duties as the Cold War had begun. Checkpoints between Russian zone and Allied forces zones became flashpoints for demonstrations and incidences. Checkpoint Charlie became a world-famous symbol of the struggle between freedom and communism. Here's a view of Checkpoint Charlie from the Russian side. Weekly inspections are held at McNair Barracks, and each man strives to have the best equipment and layout. Familiar sight all year long is a group of precision marching troops, be it on parade or off to a class. This is how wars are won, by intensive training under the most realistic combat conditions at nearby Hohenfels Forest. Nearly everyone pulls guard duty in one way or another. Such duties are a large and important part of all organizations in the military. Weapons maintenance like this on a 106 millimeter recoilless rifle keeps the infantryman close to his tools of the trade. Sports enter the year's photo album also as these men practice tug of war during organization day. Operation Nightfire, presented at the Hohenfels Force training area, was both a beautiful and a terrifying exercise. Here a painting symbolizes the U.S. Army in Berlin. Payday, of course, was a huge day, and we were paid in military script. On weekends, we went on pass out in the city. This view from inside McNair Barracks fence shows the U-Bahn streetcar that passed by the main gate. When we went on pass, this was our mode of transportation. Inside the compound fence, a Starlight Grove Club was made available to all the soldiers. Here I stand in front of the club in one evening. The club was visited often. You can't beat German beer. Here I'm at the club with Chief Skinador, a native Indian chief. Our squad rooms were always kept very neat and orderly. Every week or month, depending on the situation, we would go out on the main street and pass in review. Here is the Brandenburg Gate, site of many demonstrations. President Ronald Reagan visited Berlin later after my career in the 1980s. He famously said, "Tear down this wall." After a year of duty in Berlin, my tour of duty in Germany ended. I boarded the train and headed to Bremerhaven for the long trip to the United States. The military band was there to give us a send-off. Another 10-day voyage, we arrived in New York Harbor. The sight of the Statue of Liberty was good to see after 2 years abroad.